All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the first of a three-part Track It training series being delivered this week by RJR Innovations. I'm Derek Halp, one of the Track It account managers here at BMC, and I'm joined by Sam Malouf, Jad Toma, and Ron Sorrell, who will be taking us through the presentation. Today, we'll be covering the migration from version 11 to the latest version of Track It 2023. RJR is an exclusive partner, BMC partner, who delivers professional services along with level 1 support for Track It. Has been a longstanding partner who was founded in 2004. With that, I'll hand it over to Sam to talk a little bit more about the history and some of the services they deliver with RJR before he hands it over for the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Derek. Again, it's Sam Malouf here. I'm a senior account executive at RJR. Like Derek mentioned, we've been a BMC partner services as well as consultants. So we resell the software as well as we do an A to Z implementation from a lot of clients who are purchased the BMC product, or they're actually migrating from an older version to the latest version. That's what our discussion is all about today. So we also sell our own L1 support. So we have L1 with BMC clients. A lot of the clients that we've done the implementation, they basically come to us for the L1. And like I mentioned, we do sell the footprints, Track It, and other products of BMC, and we've been doing it for quite some time. And we've done plenty of migration, and that's what the discussion is all about today, migrating from the Track It 11 version, the older version, to the latest version. So that's the main focus of our call today. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ron Sorrell. Ron will be doing the full demo. Please feel free to ask away questions in the chat and we'll answer them along the way. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ron Sorrell.
Great, thank you, Sam. Can you go to the next slide, please? Great. So today's session, the plan is to give you the methodology or help you make a choice on how you're going to upgrade from your version 11, or some of you may be on 10, of Track It to the latest version called Track It 2023. And as you may or not be aware, this product was basically a new version when compared to what you're using now. Now, the good news is, as much as it's new, its basis comes from an architecture that has actually been built up over 20 years ago. So it's a proven platform. If some of you may have known or heard of Magic or Service Express, well, they took all the strengths of that product and built that into Track It, use that basis. Now, as this is basically a new product, BMC did help create a tool to allow you to migrate data from the version 11 to the 2023. Now, this is not an instant copy. This is not something that's going to just do and then you're done with it. So there will be some changes made, and there will be some thought process in this. Decide if this is what you want to do. Now, one of the first things BMC has it very well documented, the steps, and we'll provide after this webinar is done. We'll give you some links to that documentation. You just step by step what you need to do to make this work. Now, there's also some very good training videos. Many of you may have seen these, but I'll do a caveat, and I know BMC is working to correct this. One of the migration videos, which is kind of important to this webinar, the products change, the migration tool has changed since. So there's some information there which I'll cover as I go through the migration tool itself, that what you see in the video no longer applies. The video is about 4 or 5 years old. So just keep that in mind. If you do watch that video training, which the person does the training videos for Track It, does an excellent job. Very good. It's just that product has been tweaked a little bit since then. So keep that in mind as I go through some of this, the tool. Now, it does say in their information that the migration tool and Track It should be on a separate server. I personally install both on the same server. I've done it, it works, but preferably, because usually you probably have an older server, you're probably going to want to put track at 2023 because that'll become your new production server. You don't want to put this on a system that is going to interfere with your current production. Keep note though, that a good practice for this is when you do this, because if you have a large install, I had a client that had some 80,000 tickets. It took 10 to 12 hours to copy the data, all the tickets, all the notes, all the works, assignments, the notes, the attachments, everything. It took up to 12 hours to run that. So this is not something you want to run during against your production system, especially your first run your testing. You want to probably likely set up a staging server. So keep that in mind when you do this. You do want to go to a staging server. Now, you can, the way the license works, you can remain on 11.4 while you're in production. There's no problem with that. You can keep using 11.4 and you can test configure with 2023 while you're setting this up. And part of the migration tool is to decide, help you decide which of your data you want to migrate. And I'll show you the choices in a few minutes. Some decided, you may decide, you know what, I'm just gonna start 2023 from scratch. Again, this tool, discussion today will help you make that choice. And you just keep the 11.4 as a sort of standalone system that you go to once in a while to look up data. That's a decision you have to make. There are some things that don't come over. There's certain business rules, the way they come out, skill routing doesn't come over. So various couple of things like that. Some SLA templates won't come over. Now, one of the good things that probably maybe a lot of people will be happy about is that it has its own built internal report writer. You no longer have to rely on CRIS reports, which some might find that that's a little bit upsetting because you may feel very comfortable with CRIS reports or its later iterations of SAP objects. The good news is that you will find reporting, if you do want to keep with something like CRIS reports, business objects, SQL reporting tools, that this backend is very easy to understand. It's basically what you see on the screen when we go into it is kind of what you see in the backend. So if you want to continue using maybe a SQL CRIS reporting enterprise server, maybe you prefer Power BI, but if you decide to do that and you have that investment already, you'll find it very easy to adapt to understand the data you're looking at. All right, so with that in mind, I'm going to go to start off with the migration tool. Now, the migration tool is a separate install from BMC. And the version is very tight on the versioning. You may have to upgrade your track it, which is another reason why I want a staging table. You have to be at 11.4.1.458. We'll have that information out for you and you have to have at least SQL Server 2012. You have to release Windows 2016. So again, if you look at some of that old videos, there's information, you may see some earlier versions that references, but that's no longer valid. So that's why staging table is really important here to do that. So make sure you don't, because you may have an old version of track it, you're just not willing to upgrade, because why take your system down, production down for any length of time? So the tool is a separate installer and it has to be installed on the migration server, the 11x server. It has to be on the 11.4x server. So now, strangely with this tool is that every time you run it, it kind of wants to reinstall itself. And the good news is it doesn't take very long, but there's a certain command line that I'm not sure what it is, and they kind of hide it. So it doesn't really matter. The most you may run this tool is twice anyways. So it's not like that extra 30 seconds it takes to run. And I'm going to go through the run to show you this, how long it takes. So of course you run it, you read the whole, I know you're all going to read this, go all the way through, read it through. It's going to ask you a directory where to put it. And for the most part, the default directory is fine, but you can have it go anywhere you like. Now, it looks like it's not doing something, but it's actually extracting the files right now. So it's actually doing its job. And you'll see in a second installation process running. Sorry, I just realized my screen is not being shared, so I guess I better share that. Sorry about that. Adam, thank you. Turn off your screen. Thanks, Amy. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Everybody see my screen now? Should be able to. So if you did the first part, I ran the migration tool, which I had installed down here, and it ran it, did install. And this is the screen you're going to get. So it does explain pretty much in detail what it's going to do. And you can run this multiple times, though I'll tell you right now, if you have a large system, as I explain later, you probably everyone will want to run this twice because it can run a long time. Now, there's not many reasons why you probably can run it once and just not run it a final time. It does bring over much of the configuration over, and it'll be in the migration documents. It'll warn you, please, if you run this, you should not make configuration changes to your 11.4 system. If you do, you may have to start over, but it's not quite true. For example, you may find that you have a certain status or a certain lookup, and you had, for whatever reason, because you're testing this for a week or 2 weeks or a month, you had to add one more extra lookup to one of your values in 11.4. Well, if you really want to make sure that it works right, you just go to the new version of the track and just add the same thing. Just make them consistent. That way, when you bring the data over, because when you do the final run, it doesn't try to replicate the configuration again. It just assumes it's all there. And if you don't make the simultaneous change or run step one again, which you'll see, you'll get errors because it can't find a value. So you just got to make sure if you do in that rare situation after all this time, you have to make some very desperate or emergency change to a configuration value in 11.4, just make the corresponding change on the 2023 side. So, of course, I've read and understood all the instructions. They go through here and the next screen. So they got some, they got documentation. Click and now take you right to the documentation, or direct to support if you have questions, online help. We go to the next screen. And this is you need to how you connect to your source and your target. Now, in this instance, I'm going to go to define. So my SQL server name, whatever it happens to be. In this case, it's this machine. And my database name is that. Now, the login password here is an administrator account. That could be SA, could be something else, but you want someone the rights to read on the database. And one caveat with this, as long as you do a proper restore in some ways of your track at 11x, it doesn't truly have to be a fully enabled working system. As long as you got the attachments from the file system come over, and if you guys need some help in how to transfer from production to staging, because there's a very detailed step how to do this, there is a special batch file that helps you do that. So again, if you need that assistance, we can provide a link to that. So there's my source information, and you must test. You have no way, and you can see I have the correct version. That is the version you're looking for. So for some of you, that could be an update. You might have to go to BMC download site and get that update. So you store it to a staging table, you install your original version, you update if you have to. And for some, if you have a real old version, you may have to make a special request to BMC to get a full installer, because some people had like version 9, they went to 10, went to 11. I don't even have the original 9.0 installer, and you can't download the current 11x installer. If you need that, BMC support will get a download for you. So keep that in mind. If you don't have the full installer for some reason, or something fairly recent like 11 dot something, you may have to call support to get an installer, and they'll give you a special link for a temporary download. So I come on this side, I put now in this case, I'm on a VM, but I'm running both on here, but I have a database on different directory or different server. And I call that one track it. And again, I say login on that server. And again, I test the connection. So I've already installed 2023. It has to be installed before you do this. So you have to get a function going 2023, including you must configure the BCM client management for Trackit which comes with the installer of 2023, that must be working for this tool to work. It wants to be able to read the asset information because at the same time it's copying assets to the 2023 database. It's also copying to the client management database. If you do not have BCM working, you will not be able to go past this stage. Or at least this stage. So you probably always want to generate report on. It gives you a lot of information about what came over, what didn't come over, all the policies. It's a lot of detail. It can help you troubleshoot stuff in order to see what was done. Never see a reason why you wouldn't want data import options. Again, a good help documentation. Need a link to get to it. It'll take you to a direct link to the site. And this is the first step one. Now, what this will do, if you may have been playing in your 2023, you may have tested some test groups, you did some test users, you're just playing around with it. Maybe you did some couple of categories and so on. That'll be wiped out. So keep that in mind when you run this tool. Anything you've done as far as data and data configuration like lookups will be replaced on step one. Now, if you did some screen designs, you did some business rule changes, that's fine. They'll be okay. But as far as the data and lookup data, they're going to be wiped. You have to run step one first. This is a step that could take quite a while. Now you go through that step, it takes 2 hours, 5 hours, 12 hours, whatever it takes for that. And then you can work with the system. You look at it, you can see what's going on with it. You can play with the form configurations and so on, and make sure everything's going in and sort of in some ways learn what you have to do for when you go live, because there maybe you have to repeat some of these steps again. So you're all ready to go. It could be a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, whatever happens, and you're ready to finalize the import, or you're going to run step two. Now, you can run step one multiple times. You may have, for a reason, maybe it's been, you looked at this system and it's been 3 months since you last ran it, and you know you make changes and you don't track it. You know what? I'm just going to run this again. Many times you want. Now, the document, the video series that you see this will tell you it'll only bring over data that's changed. That is not accurate. It'll wipe out the data every time. So this is not something that, you know, hey, I ran it last week, so I run it this time. It's going to take me 20 minutes. It's going to delete all the data and do it again. So that video series, it was accurate for its time, but it's no longer accurate. They find, I guess, whatever reason that for data integrity and so on, that the differential updates wasn't working properly. So they decided to go, it's going to do it all. Step two, and you want to refresh the data. So this will clear only the module data. So this will delete the module data. So if you were just going to do step one and you're done, you thought you'd go live, you don't have to do step two. But if your time passes and you want to get the latest data because new tickets, new information, it will not touch the lookups. It expects all of them to be there, but it will delete all the data, including support staff records and everything, tickets and notes and attachments, and redo them again. But just sort of finalizes it. It'll just bring it, because you don't need to change configurations. It'll be a little quicker, but still does all the data. Now, if for some reason, maybe you didn't want all the data, but you're happy with how you configure things, you're happy with your status, you're happy with your lookups, you're happy with your priorities and your matrices, but I don't want all the data, I'll leave that because I want to start fresh from that perspective. Well, then you can run option two, and this will run very quickly, actually. And of course, if you only want some of your software, if you're using software license management, you can bring that over if you like. Now, I'm not going to run this now because I don't feel like having to sit there and I don't think we want to make this a 12-hour session. So we're going to stop there, and I'm going to go into the product now to show you what it looks like. And the part of today, I'm not going to go in a big in-depth, detailed demo of the product. I'm just going to try mostly highlight what's different, what's the same. And then in the future, down the road, if you want a more detailed demonstration, you can talk to us, you can talk to Derek or your other reps, such as Chris Carollo or Seth and so on. You had different, go to them and helps up an in-depth dive to see more of this product if you like. We'll cancel that. So now, one change right off the bat, this product, it is a browser-based only product. There is no longer a client to be installed or have an option for a client. And this is technically a cloud product. Now, it's a private cloud, expects you in most cases to have this on your own servers. So it's not going to be hosted by BMC, but it's still a cloud product. Now, you could put it in your own Azure web-based site or AWS or whatever, if you like. We have a client who did that not too long ago. We actually helped them migrate to that type of thing. But there is also one other option. There is BMC has did a partnership with AWS to provide a quick setup out of the box that AWS will help, like it's sort of almost like a pre-containerized starting point for this product. Now, that's great because you got quick, you don't need your own servers. The downside is it is a separate charge rate. You still have to pay for AWS. So keep that in mind, and you're basically starting to figure from scratch. There's no option to run the migration tool. But if you want to have a true cloud right from the get-go and you don't have your own cloud-based servers, but you still want that option to sort of push off to the cloud where it's hosted somewhere else, then you can work with, BMC or us and work the option through the AWS option and start this. Now, another thing that you're going to see a little bit different. And I write the right password. Is that this product is group-based. You must belong to one or more groups to log in. And it's those groups we're going to find that determine your access, your permissions, your forms that you see, which records you may see. Now, most cases, I like people to do one group because it's less confusing when you're signing tickets, but for demo purposes and stuff like this, especially on the administrator account, I put myself in 3 different groups. So sometimes I want to configure things or see things how a person in that group sees things. So if someone in the help desk says, well, this form doesn't look right, well, I can log into the help desk person and look at that form as they see it, or tier 1 or whatever. So I'm going to log in system administration. My software service, my password tool is telling me I didn't set up HTTPS, but that's an option too. You can set up HTTPS for your server. You don't have to use regular HTTP. You could go fully HTTPS if you like. Now, the first time I'm connecting with this, so it's taking a while to load up. It's loading up the metadata. So the first time you hit in that group or form, it takes a little bit longer to load up the code. But after that, it's quicker for everybody. Now, I'm logged in, I'm an administrator. I see lots of stuff here. And this is where I was when I left out. So this is the full aspect of the configuration options you have as administrator. And what I mentioned before, one of the first things off is that there's groups. Groups are the key to this product in some ways because it defines what you can see. If I go to help desk, I'm going to look in that group. There's people assigned to it. Now, the migration tool put everybody who is not in a sort of a tracking group or something, who didn't find one for it, by default, it put them all in this group. And you see here, when I just demoed this database I had, it's 856 people. That's how many bodies there were in that group because they were unassigned. Now, other core groups, and that's something you'll clean up. Now, a lot of you probably don't have that many staff and many users. It won't be much of a cleanup. But if I go to tier 1, I only get one person in the group. And assign people to a group, it's just a matter of clicking on here and say assign, remove, whatever. If I do assign, I get the staff list. I can pick whoever I want. Yeah, Darren should be in that group too. Now, nice thing about this tool is that you do have very granular permissions. So if I go to group permissions, you got a lot of details you can work with. So this is something, a lot of this is probably, there's probably some similar stuff and you'll track it, but some of this is fairly new that came with sort of this version of the product. And advanced permissions per module, you can decide what access people have to different areas, whether view, just create, and you can say, you know what, this group should not have delete on anything. I can do that. Because I'm an administrator, some things you can't take away. They always seem you always should be able to assignment note. You should always have to be able to assign a ticket note. That's just a default permission. I can't do anything with that. And if you like a group, you can copy those permissions from another group, maybe made a new group and you like all permissions. I don't want to check 50 boxes again. You can copy permissions from one group to another group. And to keep in mind is that staff also have, if I go back to technicians, and I'm going to go find Mr. Not Mark, administrator. Actually, so go to him, and I can go look at the staff record. This is where you just start defining what group they're in, whether they're using a Windows authentication or not. If they require password never expires, you might do that for some people that don't have Windows authentication. What type of license they're going to use. So in this case, it's a name license, or you may have concurrent as well. So that's an option for this. You know, you have named or concurrent licensing. Any special lookups, custom fields. And the thing with these fields, even though this is the out-of-box default, this can all be modified to say different values. The form can be changed. And even individual staff can have their own permissions. So staff had their own permissions. So group had permissions. The staff also have permissions that can be less than a group. Now you have all these inactive people. So who did I just put in that group? That was David. So I go to Darren and I can see who has Windows authentication, who doesn't. So you can do it per person by person. So I go to see Darren, there's all his information. If his email address, who his boss is, what groups he's in. Now, if I go back a step, I can go, I want to do Darren his permissions. And you get something similar to group permissions. A little bit less choices here, but pretty much very similar. And I can go do permissions here. Now, if this group that I just picked, help desk, did not have delete permission, that would be grayed out unchecked. A user can never have more than the group permissions. Most cases, when you set group permissions, that's pretty much good for everybody else. But maybe you have a new person. Maybe you don't want them to have certain rights. So you can actually, when you add them to the group, they take on the group permissions, and then you can take away their individual permissions and put them back later. You're very granular that way.
Ron, quick question. There's a
Sure.
question in the chat. If I remove a user that was added to a technician group, what happens to the ticket that was tied to their name?
Perfect. Good question. So good news is nothing, because you're not deleting the person from the system, in which you never should do that. If in most cases, 99% of the time, you make them just inactive. It does nothing because you just remove them from a group. So you can reassign to other groups, take them off groups, make them inactive, but the data itself is tied to that specific technician record, not to their assignment of the group at the time. So no changes gets affected by those. Nothing, none of the historical data gets changed by any group changes or assignments. So requesters, they come over as well. In this case, 2,700 came over. Now, you might find there's a lot of odd groups, and you might are users and names and even staff, because you had the way track it worked. You sort of may have made up a lot of odd type workarounds and names. You can clean those up and you can make them inactive and whatever you need to do. Mark. I keep on call him Mark Fry because that makes more sense to me. So I got, here's Mark Fry. He's allowed access to self-service. You can decide what level of self-service. We'll see that demo shortly. Whether he gets to see just his own request, whether he gets to see all departments and locations, or both. What type of authentication? So Windows authentication. So you can have your requesters come in through Windows authentication as well. And if departments, these are departments that are in your system and tracking out, these would come over. Those are your departments that you currently have. And locations, these are locations that you currently have in your system, they come over. And if this information, such as like if the Sydney was populated with their city state, you would see it here, but because none of the information was put in that record, it's not showing, nothing to show. Again, quite a few number of custom fields. Some of this may get automatically brought over from the other system, depending what you're doing in track at 11x. Now, this data can be imported in going forward. So you can set up an automatic Active Directory import to bring both them over and or staff. Generally, don't bring staff over because they don't change too often. So I generally only tell people just do it for your clients, but you can have your clients update once a night, once a week, once a month, whatever you like. As I showed you, you have your departments. So if I go to the lookups area, your departments come over, your location come over. If you have vendors in your system because you have assets, your activity codes, you should recognize these from your own system. Many of these are out of the box, but some of these come with the system or came from your own Trackit. And each of these can be extra details as required. When, do I want to see this in both tickets and assignments? Maybe I just don't want it. I don't want to see in assignments because we don't build in assignments or vice versa. Do I track time or not? So some of these actions, when you add them in a ticket, it automatically accumulates time. Maybe you don't need that for certain actions. And if you want to hide it. So that's one thing with this tool has a lot, mark inactive, you don't want you generally don't want to delete data. So I don't want to delete my codes. If I don't want people to see them, I make them inactive. Because if you do delete something, sort of referencing that question that just came up, if you delete something, that will remove it from that field. So if you deleted build, all the previous notes added will still be there, but the action code will be blank. If I delete that staff member, Mark, if it was a Darren, if I go back to his old tickets, wherever you say Darren's name would be gone. The tickets will still be there, but just that field of his name would be gone. And there's nothing worse than having nulls. Is something null or blank because I was supposed to be, or is that a mistake? So that's why I invariably, normally don't delete data unless you truly know it was in use, or maybe in the back end you combined, you can do things like, hey, I'm going to combine build and repair into one code, and you did some back end script, whatever. If you're confident that there's nothing attached to it, then you can delete it. But generally, though, most cases, if you don't need something, hide it. Just make it inactive. Oh, back to my lookups. So priorities, if you had them in place. Now, there's duplicate here because out of the box, there's priorities. And of course, it brought over the ones from the current system. So you have to decide which one you want to keep. You do, and it you do. If you want to keep if you don't want to keep the old ones, there's ones you can delete. You can actually delete the ones out of the box because they've never been used in your tickets, where you keep yours. And you go back and rename these if you like. You don't have to stick that naming strategy. You can rename these. Anything can be just pretty much renamed. And work schedules, you have different work schedules. And so some ways, if you have a 2-hour response time and you have a 8-hour day, well, 3 o'clock today won't exceed until 9 o'clock tomorrow because you have a work schedule from 8 to 4. So keep that in mind. So if you use work schedules, it does affect your due dates and fixed dates. There's 3 different dates that can be configured based upon business hours. So you can do this in business hours. You can do this by 24 hours per priority. So critical is 24 hours. So I don't pick a work schedule, or maybe I pick a 24-hour work schedule that has Christmas off because that's the only holiday we get off. So you have some flexibility there to do that. If you go very low, you can say that one has a 40-hour schedule so that becomes 3 days and 8 hours. It kind of weird thing. In this case, you got to keep in mind what, days means. In a work schedule, 40-hour week, that's, you got to remember that's only 8 hours per day. So 3 days is actually more than 3 days. If I pick that 40-hour week, if I really only want 3 days and 8 hours, I might change that to 32 hours because it's 8 hours a day, which becomes 4 days. So you got to keep that in mind. Categories. So that is your classification of your tickets. Now, unfortunately, by default, you see all the categories here, including active ones. One of the things I like to get, hopefully, just like staff, I like to get a drop down that says hide inactive ones. But be it as it may, this is, you see, as a system administrator, you see all categories. And this is your for reporting, this is for classification, this is for specialists when you want to assign tickets based on a certain category, and they go multi-levels. This is not necessarily a good or bad tree. This is just what came over from a database. Yours, you might see a chance to clean this up, and you could do a wholesale, make these all inactive, make a brand new ones. Again, you don't necessarily want to delete these. You may want to make them inactive. Now, on the form definition side, I'm going to do here, you can define the forms in this tool by different groups. So you can make these forms any way you like per group. And one of the things I did in the test here, if I go to the help desk side, I'm going to go new ticket. I'll just pick an existing ticket, doesn't matter which one. Just for example, I did a quick form change to this. I added the track it, and the reason I've added this so I can highlight for you, I added the original track it number ID to the form because you notice here, keep that in mind, the track it numbers are not preserved. You get new ticket numbers when you do the migration tool, but it does keep the original in the record. So you may want to add that to the form for searching purposes and or just for viewing. So when someone, you can see what the original track it number is when you're reaching out to somebody, or when you're sending out an email, when you configure emails, you want to include the original track it ID number. So assignments have this and tickets have that. So keep that in very important because the numbers may not match. So you want to put that in the form. And form design is very easy to do. It's just drop and drag. Now, most cases when you people log in, they're going to see something like this, some kind of dashboard. And this has way too many categories, so that I'd fine tune that one. But tickets owned by technicians, you can click on here. You can actually drill down on these. So it's like a query on a fly reporting. And you can decide whatever queries you want here, add additional ones. Pick whatever chart you want, make new ones, pick any custom field. You can make as many ones you want and apply that, and that's what gets set. So chart type, line, chart field. I'll just grab some real quick here. Do me a record there for, I didn't do a quickie because this database has a lot of data, but you can decide and that auto refresh. So that's what your user may see when they come in. Now, we only got a few minutes left. I'm just going to quickly show self-service. So self-service, typical thing here, and you may not have used it. Again, the self-service can be multiple languages. They got built-in languages, French, Spanish, which probably is most likely one that's important to you, French and Spanish. And first time logging in, so it takes a little bit longer. Wait for that to come in. There we go. And so this is what they'll see. And then create a new ticket, very simplified form. You can make this form as like you can simplify by removing fields. And what they see as they create tickets can be somewhat different when they look at a ticket or exists. So you see here the form changes when I'm first creating one versus looking at one, and you can add notes. You can let the individuals add notes. They can close their own tickets, cancel it. These were cancel it and close it. If there's any broadcast or announcements that show up to the top, they can do search and solutions if you give them access. So that's kind of a, in a nutshell, sort of a quick overview of the whole system. One thing, we didn't show it, but there is, I mentioned before, data segregation per group. So you may have HR versus IT. Well, I don't want IT to see HR tickets. So you can make it so that whether it's within the application or running any report from internally, that IT can't see HR tickets and HR can't see IT, but the administrator can see both. So any mix and match to that. So I guess we're briefly running out of time. Does anybody have any other questions?
Ron, there's a question that came in. Do you need to turn off Trackit services on the production box during the migration?
It's somewhat recommended that you do, but that's again why I suggest a staging table. If no one's on the system, because you don't want to be doing the migration while people are actually adding tickets and doing things, because then you can have data showing up and you might have orphan records because it does the tickets first, and all of a sudden there's like 5 more rows of ticket notes that the system may pick up, but there's no parent. So it's really best to do this as a staging table, unless no one's on the system and you're ready to go final go live, then you really don't have to turn anything off. Except for you want to turn off mail because you don't want any new stuff coming in. So you kind of want to stop, and you don't need the Trackit service to be running to run this tool. So if you want to play it safe, stop them. Because the tool, this migration tool, does not need Trackit services running, nor does it even really need the Trackit 2023 system running. You don't even have the web services even running, because once it starts doing the data migration, it's purely at the database to database level. It does not go through the web OS layer at all. Well, no more questions. That's great. And again, and I think Sam will wrap things up here, but just, feel free to reach out with more questions, or feel free to reach out in terms you want a more in-depth demo, because you can see there's lots to cover and it's very quickly, you can run out of time showing you all the functions and features. So I'll turn it over to you, Stan. I'll stop the share.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Hopefully everyone had a good understanding of what the migration is all about. We will be sharing this recording on our website, but also we'll be sending out to all the attendees since we have all the emails. Again, I really appreciate your time. Derek, thank you for being on the call with us. And for more information, you can feel free and send us an email to the email address that you see there. Again, we've done multiple migrations from 11 to the latest version. We can have that discussion anytime. Just feel free to email us and we'll do that. In the meantime, thank you very much all for attending. Have yourself a great afternoon, and looking forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.